Busisiwe Mkhwebane's impeachment inquiry yesterday ended with her removal from office as public protector for misconduct and incompetence following a vote in the National Assembly. Political analyst and Wits School of Governance visiting professor, Professor Booysen, and diversity trainer and political analyst Asanda Ngoasheng join me now to discuss what's next for that important office and what lessons have been learned from the exit of Advocate Mkhwebane. Good evening and welcome to the both of you. Thank you so much for joining us on Full View. There is a lot to discuss on this one. And Asanda, maybe we start with you. For those asking whether the National Assembly should shoulder the blame for endorsing her in the first place, how much can one know about how appropriate or how well an appointee will function in the role? Could they have done more before around 160 million rand was spent to get her out of office?
Yes, indeed. I think so much more could have been done. The process could certainly have been conducted quite differently. It is difficult to pinpoint exactly the points at which it could have been done. It should probably have been done quite a bit earlier, when avalanche of court cases, very credible court rulings as far as I can ascertain, had been commenting on her lack of appropriate level of grasp of the legal processes and legal intricacies. And that process was postponed until Cyril Ramaphosa's baggage started catching up with the ANC, and then it came to a very difficult moment to actually take that action. And it's no wonder that many parties are alleging, I don't think accurately so, but many are alleging that actually there is some political agenda in acting against her. So that could have been done differently and earlier. And I think in the very first place, her appointment selection process that should have been handled differently. And we come again to the point where I think the need is at the moment, when we get to the point of a new appointment, where it's really, given also the specific political circumstances, a very, very senior, established legal person should preferably occupy this position, given that this position comes with so much political baggage and traps that are built in, given that in South Africa we're at the stage of so much political controversy where senior political leaders are going to be in the spotlight and in the ambit of public protector investigations and rulings.
Asanda, actually, I would really love your thoughts on this one before we move to the second question.
I think that, I think she deserved to be removed personally. I think that she showed herself from a long time ago to be incompetent. There are those court cases which she lost, mostly on technical legal aspects, which is literally her job, to be able to win cases using the law. And I think that, there is a sense in which, yes, the timing seems suspect because it has to do with, her being removed kind of closely followed Cyril Ramaphosa having to face his skeletons. But I think the writing was on the wall long before that. And I think she abused her power, as far as I'm concerned, in the hiring of the lawyers, in the constant, postponements, and some of the very, very unsavory things that she did when she was now given the opportunity to defend herself. And I think South Africa didn't deserve to waste so much money. And I think that we really need to rethink how we appoint and how we remove public protectors. But I also think, there isn't always a way to know whether somebody's going to be fit for a job until they have been placed in the position. And I think this might be one of those cases where she could have been a good lawyer, she could have been a good person in the law, and then she entered this arena. And I think she also was quite brave in the kind of cases that she was taking, but she didn't do what was needed legally in order to ensure that these were winnable cases and that she had the law quite well thought out in order to be able to win these cases.
So I thought it was quite interesting, and thank you for that opening. Interesting that this office, Asanda, as you say, has built-in legal traps, and you need someone who kind of has I'm assuming based on what you said, thicker skin, more experience, more maturity in the role. Given the shadows cast by her proposed successors report on Phala Phala, we're talking about Advocate Kaleka now, on that report on Phala Phala, and some are unconvinced that it was above board. Does she have the public's support that is necessary, especially for the Public Protector's office, Susan?
About a broader public support, it's difficult to say at this early stage. I imagine that given the unfortunate start to which she got as acting public protector, there will already be many questions that are being asked about her suitability. Among politicians, given that the ANC leadership, Cyril Ramaphosa, are in many ways, despite overwhelming conference majorities, etc., are quite contested leadership. There are so many questions hanging around the top leadership of, for example, the ANC. So it is going to be, for politicians, I think, a very divided game as to where she's going to go in future. We've already seen the threat or promise of so many additional cases also regarding CR17 funding. That is not going to go away. And so it is going to be a politically very divisive game. And I don't think, because she was acting public protector at a time when a contentious Phala Phala report, investigation and report came, I really do not think this is a good beginning for a new term of office.
Asanda, as you take the long view and as we prepare to go into a new phase of a new public protector over the 7-year term, how would you evaluate the results of the last 7 years of scandal, accusation and litigation, what that has meant for the reputation and the integrity of the office of the public protector?
Well, I think, before we go to the future, I think we need to look to the past. It's important to say that, first of all, this public protector role was never the high profile, corruption busting, headline making profile that it has now until Thuli Madonsela took that office. And I think also until Thuli Madonsela herself was taking on Jacob Zuma in Nkandla, we didn't know the extent or just how wide the berth was in terms of its capabilities. And I think that, Thuli is to be commended definitely for the role that she played. And I think where we sometimes then have a problem is that we assume that because there was a Thuli who did this job in this way, that it's always going to be done this way. And we saw this also with President Jacob Zuma and the ways in which he flouted the constitution and did so many things that we thought as a country was not possible. And I think this is the lesson that we've learned with Mkhwebane, that, just because we have had people who know what it means to uphold the law, who know what it means to use the constitution for good, it doesn't mean every single incumbent is going to follow that path. I do want to commend her, though, for being brave and taking on very difficult cases, both legally and politically. And I think that one of the opportunities we missed was to have real discussions around, were there any merits around engaging the role of the role of the Reserve Bank, where the Reserve Bank sits, and how we engage with the Reserve Bank. There also needed to be some conversations around the ABSA court case and what were the merits around that. And I think that when we focus purely on the legal aspects, we don't then always engage properly with what was possible. And I think those two cases are cases that we need to think about, and that even the new public protector needs to engage in and see if there's any merit to looking at the case again and to seeing what questions are still remaining. And I think the new public protector is then going to have a very difficult job, because she's following two brave women, albeit very different in capability, very different in approach, but quite brave. It has to be said that both were quite brave in how they did this job, whether we agree or not with some of the outcomes.
I think, Asanda, just listening to what you're saying and how, in a sense, with Thuli Madonsela's advent and ever since, the office has been, I suppose if we had a pop quiz, quickly on the spot answer, who was the public protector or the two public protectors before Madonsela, a lot of people would have to think twice. We'd forget Mushwana and Bakwa, who was, the inaugural public protector. But let's go back to what I think is really important that you raise, and that is, Asanda, around the public and the influence and the agendas that they can perhaps put back on the table. And Susan, I'll ask you for a quick rounding off answer on this one. Asanda is talking about SAB and SAIX and so on, and certain matters which are really in the public interest. It really is the question of how can members of the public have more impact in terms of placing certain topics on the agenda of the Public Protector's Office and holding the office accountable beyond anything that the National Assembly or that Parliament can do.
Yes, that is indeed such a vexed question on how to hold those public institutions to account to, and through accountability to get them to perform better. I really think government processes, maybe even the Office of the Public Protector itself, can go further and ensuring that there are some more specific, more articulated and very public fora for public engagement and accountability, even sessions, public sessions where people can be engaged, virtual sessions, and to assess that kind of public opinion around them. Public opinion is not everything, but very often that the common wisdom goes a long way in profiling institutions and in helping those institutions to perform to public standards. So I think that openness and access and accountability, because there's such a direct interface with politicians and very often with very controversial politicians, and the public protector in a way needs to be helped to create more distance between that office and the politicians themselves. So some public forums, better articulated. I know there is public engagement and public opinion does serve a role. Public can request certain investigations, but perhaps a more systematic interface to create that level of public accountability and interaction can go some way.
Yeah, which is critical at this time. Well, some would say at every time in South Africa's history, it has been critical. And just for the record, no shade, as the kids say, on Mkhwebane and Bakwa. I appreciate the both of you. Thanks for joining us.